but the half I saw was really cool. I think I can help you get set up. Thanks to Madison and the Tech Systems crew for the refreshments, the food and drinks today. Without them, you would be sitting here gnawing on your fingernails. My name is John Roby. I'm one of the co-organizers of the Lincoln Agile community, along with Kyle, Andy, Rob, and Bill Udell, who I don't think has arrived yet. We take turns organizing our meetups at various places in Lincoln, as you well know. This meetup is Agile for Sports. Scott Ballinger is the head coach of Nebraska Wesleyan Baseball. Nick Zawacki is the pitching coach. I work with Nick at Cabela's. How this kind of came up is, I was talking to Nick. Nick recently got his Scrum Master certification, learned about Agile principles, and started telling me about how he's applying, him and his head coach are applying Agile principles to iteratively deliver improvement in his baseball team's performance. So we thought, well, why not? I mean, when we come to these meetings, we talk about mob programming, we talk about how to deliver projects in the IT space, but really, Rob has repeated ad infinitum to me that Agile isn't about IT, Agile is about agility, and it applies anywhere. And so we thought we'd do a non-IT focused meetup about how to apply Agile principles for sports. So with that, I will turn it over to Scott and Nick for the presentation.
Like John introduced us and went through our entire opening speech.
Sorry.
Yeah, thanks. Nick Zawacki, assistant baseball coach with Nebraska Wesleyan. I also work at Cabela's as a project manager and process improvement manager. Really, when we sat down and we saw how Agile can be applied to sports and how it can be applied to our team and the improvements that we saw, it made sense, which is what it makes sense in software to do as well. So we got a pretty good in-depth presentation and a couple things that we want to go over. If you want to introduce or kick it off.
Yeah, we're Scott Ballinger. So I've never been a part of the business world. So my background is, worked some social work, residential treatment center, moved into teaching, and then from there moved into coaching at the university, and I've got a wonderful opportunity in front of me. However, it's always a process, and Nick came to me with this Agile kind of management style, and it intrigued me and wanted to learn more. So hopefully we can give you some good information.
So we're going to kick it off. We got about a 3 to 4 minute video here for you guys to kind of settle in, enjoy some food. We'll try to kick off on what we're getting at with this video that we're about to go into.
Hey, the outcome was what you wanted, right?
The outcome was what I wanted.
So what was going on? Why would we show Game 7 of the World Series?
Because it was awesome.
It was absolutely awesome. We were just joking around back there, that umpire, I probably would have been tossed out of that game. I've been tossed 6 times. He has to keep me in control in the dugout, so I'm not real good with umpires. So it was an awesome game, but what else? How is it applied to Agile? A lot of different plays, right? It changed every single time. All of a sudden, you're up by 1, down by 1, tie game. Everything's changing. And what is Agile? It's adapting to change, right? In a given baseball game, home team throws 125 pitches, the away team throws 125 pitches. That's 250 times in a game that it is changing, and the outcome could potentially change. So it only makes sense to create a philosophy of change, create an environment that's conducive to change. And that's what Agile is. So I want you guys to think about that and think about where things change and how things change outside of software. So as we go through this presentation, our objective is to think different about Agile. It's not just for software. Okay? We're going to show you how the changing college athletics environment is very similar to the changing business environment. And Coach is going to talk about that. Then we're going to go through how we've actually implemented it within our practices and within our layout of how we're going about getting ready for this season. We just started this in the fall, and when we started it, we saw immediate improvements based off of feedback that we had been receiving from our players over the past couple seasons. And both from a performance standpoint in the fall and just the overall atmosphere as a coach, you can feel when you have a good team. You can feel that excitement, that drive, and that energy is definitely back for NW baseball. So that's the agenda today. Give you a heads up, we are baseball coaches. Okay, so we have loose tongues, we might be very blunt, swear, all that kind of stuff. We don't mean to offend you, but we spend most of our time in a dugout and yelling at umpires, so things do get away from us. So I just want to give that as a little bit of a heads up. At the same time, we like to hear it back. So this is a fun environment, safe environment. That's what this is supposed to be.
Careful what you wish for, Nick.
Yeah. Thanks, John. This is a fun environment, safe environment. Baseball's fun, goddammit. So let's have some fun today. So we'll run through, like I said, the agenda. We'll go to questions and answers. We're going to start this next section off first with another video because I want to show you the way sports used to be. And then Coach will come up and give a presentation.
Hey, raise your hand in here if anybody's played high school athletics. How many have ran into a herd in their career? Absolutely. Do you think a herd would make it in today's world, today's society? Probably not. You know, my background, I played high school baseball, Legion baseball, but in Wakefield, Nebraska. And if anybody's ever been up there, you can attest that it is a beautiful facility. It is the baseball capital of Nebraska. Coach Eaton is essentially the herd. Coach Eaton, this is a guy that's put in 50 years worth of service. And over those 50 years, he's had 25 state titles. He's won over 3,500 games. So his resume is truly remarkable. However, to get to those victories, we had to put in a lot of work. You know, I can give you some examples. He always went on the premise of high expectations, hard work, dedication, being there with one another. But, you know, it was a bad sign at the middle of practice if he would just stop practice and say, boys, go find a bag and do rundowns. And we'd do rundowns for 45 minutes as this guy walks off the field and starts pulling dandelions from the flower beds. And you know, the whole time he's kind of paying attention of what the communication was like, what the effort was like, and what the execution was. And I'm telling you, this stuff would be going on for 30 to 40 minutes. Other examples, three-baggers. Essentially, you'd have 4 guys starting, you know, at a base at home, and you had to go 3 times around under a minute. And I was in really good shape, and I'd be one of those guys that wanted to be one of the first guys. I was driven, but you have some guys that are out of shape, and the expectation was under a minute, otherwise everybody runs it again. It was madness, but guess what? Those gentlemen that weren't fast, they still made it. Another example, you know, this seems pretty simple, but the expectation was by the time you show up to the field, you are to have your uniform on and being ready. And I still remember this. I finished up with Boys State. I was down here for Boys State, and I think you might have been a little pissed that I chose to do that and play some baseball. But I went to Boys State, got some food poisoning down here, and we played Sioux City Healing, #1 team in the state of Iowa. And I did not feel good at all. Weak, it was hot, and it's like a 1 o'clock game. And I've got our catcher shows up to the ballpark with just shorts on, and he didn't have his pants on, didn't have his stirrups on, and there we are. We had to run, so we had to run pulls, and it was 10 pulls. Up and back was 1, and we had a double header to follow. But nonetheless, you know, it was one of those things that I think what he was able to do is push us to absolute exhaustion, and then you look around your teammates, and you look and you see your teammates have actually made it through it, and it was a team bonding moment. And I feel like that's kind of lost in today's society. You know, I think we're surrounded by, I'm sorry, but snowflakes. You put the heat on and they melt. But, you know, nonetheless, you know, shoot, I'm a family guy. I've got 3 boys, and I've got to find a way to be a father and have them develop skills so they can be successful in today's world. So I think Agile is a great way to kind of meet that need. Teaching, you know, I love teaching. Oftentimes my administrators didn't like my approach because, here's the thing, I could not control a lot of things outside of that classroom, but I could control what I did in that classroom as far as expectations, the learning, the objective, all of it. But this was, they didn't like it that I treated it as my little island. But this was really tough, is when I would hold those expectations for young people, and I was a really strict teacher because I figured it's best to start off strict and then loosen up once those young people can understand what I'm about. But telling the parents is unreal of how little Johnny could go home and twist something into his side, and the parents are the ones that are then jumping down my throat and going to administrators, and the administrators didn't want any kind of conflict, so it's easy just to concede and not work through a problem. And so today's society is much different, and we're going to start with a few things. Accountability. You know, on the baseball diamond, it absolutely infuriates me if a young man makes an error, and what's the first thing to do? Put a glove, right? Or they look at their teammate, or they say, "My bad," and then just move on. Other things, you know, it's blaming the coaches. Individualism. With our team, we have got greater talent. With that greater talent means competition. However, if we've got a bunch of individuals that are looking out for themselves, I'm telling you, they are a cancer. And it's an underlying cancer. But the good thing is, I feel like we've weeded that out. Our guys are getting to a point where they love that challenge, and they want to push themselves, and they want to push that person that is ahead of them, that may be on that depth chart. Next one. Immediate gratification. We live in a society in which you can get an answer just like that. You know, I'm laughing at myself. It's like I use it. You know, I'm surrounded by information. It's great. Going down the highway, you listen to the radio and you're trying to figure out who the artist is. Anybody play that game? Right? So I'm turning to my wife and say, "Hey, who's the artist?" And you can get that information, but I think what it does is it retrains the brain to eliminate the processes, right? Eliminate the process and get to something that you want. And in the game of baseball counters all of that. You know, it's like we just watched, what, a 3.5-minute video of a exciting game that lasted over 4 hours. Game of baseball, you're looking at 120 minutes of essentially work, but it boils down to 6 minutes. So you have to teach young people how to put in the time to be successful. So immediate gratification, another one. Participation trophies. And I get it, right? I mean, you want to encourage young people, you know, you put in the work, you should get something out of it, but this stuff of, you know, having some tangible item, I don't believe in it. You know, I do some coaching over the summer and the league gives me these little ribbons. I don't need it. You know, these young people, they don't need it. They don't need to be reminded that they got to participate in something, even though they got their asses handed to them 15 times in the season, right? I mean, participation trophy is about, it teaches complacency, and I don't want that. We don't want that. We want to teach people to meet the challenge and figure out ways to better themselves, as opposed to just, all right, I got a trophy out of this, I feel good about it, I don't have to get any better. Okay? Next. Media. I have a tough time with this one. It almost reminds me of Herb. Imagine if Herb in today's society, it would be blowing up worldwide about how this man is abusive. But the reality is, if you know who Herb is and the character and what he represents, he may be demanding, but I'm just saying in today's media, I think there is a slant, a bias towards individuals, coaches that demand a lot, and it creates distrust of authoritative figures. So we have a lot of stuff going on. Nick, you got 2 others?
Twitter, social media. We talk about all this that plays into taking away from the team, and one of the worst things is the social media aspect of it. I can go on to Twitter and tweet out to Luke Bryan and I'm somebody special. Well, no, not really, so can 350 million other people. But in today's society and the way youth are growing up, social media is playing into the hand that you are something special. No, you're not. You have to work and earn to be something special. You are not just born special. And social media plays into supporting that, of that immediate, what I'm saying actually means something. You go and you look at it, and this will probably cause some controversy, so I apologize for this, but you look at Colin Kaepernick and what he does. Does he have the right stance, wrong stance on what the nation is and the divide and all that kind of stuff? That's not for me to judge. But if he's a player on my team, I'm having him come to me and I'm going to figure out a way that we can improve the situation. Taking a knee on a sideline didn't accomplish anything. It divided the team. It divided the country further. And it took away from what you're supposed to do on the field. If one of my players has that stance, I want them to come to me, and him and I are going to figure out a way that we can actually accomplish something. But we figure that taking a knee on a sideline is actually doing something, and it's really not. And that leads to the entitlement aspect of it. You're entitled. To you, you should be given something. You shouldn't have to work at it. So you go and you play college baseball and you're recruited for college baseball. You don't feel like you need to work anymore. You feel like you should be the starting shortstop. Well, guess what? 6% of all high school athletes make it to the college level. So that 6% are a pretty damn good 6% that you now have to compete with. You cannot expect to just come in and play. The entitlement aspect plays into this of the changing landscape of people not wanting to work, and it's always on somebody else's fault. So what we had identified here ultimately is no different in sports or college athletics as it is in business, right? Ultimately, we face challenges today that we didn't face previously. In college athletics, all of the red that we put up there are stuff that we have to overcome if we want to be a championship team. Job of a head coach or the job of a coach is to turn this into that. You see a big difference between that, don't you? So the first picture, and we went through a variety of pictures, and we chose this one on purpose. That first picture, everybody's down on their phones, not communicating, not talking, all not uniformed. Here, you can't tell who is who. They are as a team, they are working together. The shields are up, the defense is up. They're working as one. And that's essential in college athletics. You have one good player does not mean you're going to win a national championship. Louisville most likely has a Heisman Trophy winner on their team. They just got thumped yesterday by Houston, second loss of the season. No chance they are going to the playoffs or winning a national championship. You got to turn that talent into a team. So then the question comes of how. And I want to share a story, a couple stories. So does everybody know who the guy on the left is?
No, never heard of him.
Get some Michigan bias here now.
I am from Michigan, so I am a diehard Michigan fan. But yes, that is Jim Harbaugh. Anybody know who that guy is? Brian Kelly for Notre Dame. Any Notre Dame fans here? All right, thank you. First and foremost, if you want to have a championship team, you do not wear a visor. That is it's an accessory. It is not meant on the sideline. So if you want a championship team, don't wear a visor. No, there's a story out there. So there's a four-star recruit lineman that was being recruited by Notre Dame. Grew up loving Notre Dame. And he goes in to meet with Brian Kelly. And Kelly calls him or he's sitting down in the office and he knows Kelly's door is shut. And a player comes out, and his door's shut. Another player goes in, comes out, and then he brings the recruit in. Sits down, talks with the recruit for 35, 45 minutes. The recruit gets up, goes on a campus tour, goes out to lunch, and leaves. A week later, he gets a letter from Kelly saying, I want you to be on my team. Here's a full scholarship. He's like, well, I've always dreamed of playing for Notre Dame. So a couple weeks later, just to test out his options, he goes up to Michigan. He notices when he's sitting there and going into the office that Harbaugh has an open door policy. Even when he's sitting and talking with the recruit, he doesn't shut the door. And a player came in and had a question for Harbaugh. And he thought that was the coolest thing. He's accessible. He goes and talks with Harbaugh. Harbaugh goes on the tour with him around campus, is talking with him. There's a couple other recruits with them. They go to the game that day. After the game, they go and they wait to get picked up to go back to the hotel. Here shows up this minivan, and Jim Harbaugh is driving the minivan to take him back to the hotel. He immediately turned down Notre Dame and signed with Michigan. Now, anybody that's followed college football knows that Harbaugh is a hothead. He's difficult to play for. You don't want to be a ref on his sideline. So here's this coach that gets the most out of his team. And if you listen to any of the players and how they describe what's going on, it's always about the team. The team, the team, the team. And Harbaugh gets that out of his players. So here's a guy that gets it out of his players. Similar to Kelly. Kelly's been to a national championship. But two different styles for recruiting. Right? He's making the pitch to the nowadays generation different than the way Kelly did. He changed. He adapted. Another story with Harbaugh, this one's probably my favorite one. He shows up last year, and recruiting day started at 12:01 on February 2nd, let's say. And at 12:01, he's knocking on this kid's door. 12:01 in the morning. The kid knew he was showing up. Harbaugh goes in there, talks with the kid for 2 hours, and sleeps on the kid's floor in his bedroom. It's changing. It's adapting. It's playing into not only making that kid important, but showing that Harbaugh is not above the team. And we'll get into that in a couple of our slides here. But ultimately, whether you're a player or you're a coach, you cannot see yourself as above the team. What does that sound like in business?
Servant leadership.
Servant leadership, right? It's a flat organization. It's not command and control. Now, sports is a little different. You do have to have some authority figure with it, but it needs to be reduced from a command and control, Brian Kelly, closed door approach, I'm going to tell you what to do, to a Jim Harbaugh, we're in this together. So that's why I put that up there between those two. Again, I love college football, love college athletics, and I absolutely hate Iowa this week.
So like you want to be surrounded by quality employees, and I'm telling you, like, if there's anything that you can do for me, possibly give me some background of how you're selecting individuals. What characteristics are you looking for? Because I would be really intrigued. Because when we're recruiting, we need to find the right personnel. So number one, it's like I receive hundreds of emails weekly with video, whether it's game video, whether it's just practice session video. But essentially, if I'm not able to get out and watch these people play live, I've got to see that they can pass the eye test. Now, by no means are we looking for the 5-star, never will we get 5-star, but what I'm looking for is athleticism. I'm looking for arm action, essentially somebody that can project into getting bigger and stronger and being surrounded by a good group of guys, a good group, a family-like culture. Other things, I want to see, all too often I see these videos and it's all about little Johnny hitting a home run. I don't care about that. I want to see a video in which shows these successes paired with any kind of failures, because I want to see how this individual handles it. Their nonverbals during success or failure. Their interactions with their teammates. Are they individuals that are going to inspire their teammates, be positive with their teammates, or is it going to be somebody who fails and cut down teammates and isolate? I don't want that individual. Now, we've all been there. We've all failed, and you may stew for a little bit, but I don't want guys that are going to remain in that type of mode. Okay, next. So once we see that an individual can play baseball, the second thing that I'm going to be looking for is academic work. We have to, Nebraska Wesleyan is a very unique institution. We have to find the right fit. We have to find somebody with a really good business background, they're interested in business, or they're going to pre-med track, there's sport management over there, but we have to find the right fit. In addition to that, I need to have individuals that have quality scores, ACT, GPA. Now, I'm not too concerned about the ACT. The GPA is what I'm looking for. I need somebody that's going to have a long track of quality grades. The ACT, when I was teaching, I had trouble with this, and it causes some of the problems we see right now. Is when I'm teaching middle school, our formative work, or that homework, we could not figure into the final grade, which just blew my mind. So that would be like us as a baseball team. Forget practice, guys. Let's just show up on Saturday and play, and let's see how we do. So then these really smart individuals that didn't necessarily have to do the homework were just showing up for test day and doing really well. Well, guess what? Eventually they get into a prestigious institution and they don't have the skills necessary to be successful. So when I'm looking at academic work, I want a quality GPA, because one is, bottom line, we want guys graduating from our institution. Two, I want gentlemen that are going to be taking care of their academic work, for then when they step between the lines and play the game, they can focus on the game and not be worried about other baggage. Okay, no pun intended there. So, next.
Team GPA last year, Coach?
3.11. Highest in last 12 years. Are we happy with that? No. Because we still, our goal is actually, what do you have it? 3.25? 3.25, and our guys are coming up with ways to get that figured out. I know early on, freshmen really struggle with the organizational skills and time management. So the first thing that they do in week one is meet with me, and I build a schedule for them of, essentially when they need to get up, when they need to eat breakfast, when they're studying, when they're going to class. It seems very controlling, but I see it. There's young people that just wing it, and they fail. And we want to provide a blueprint for success. Background, family. I want to have time to sit down and talk with families. I want the opportunity. I want to know what the first 3 years were like of raising that child, because I'm a true believer. The blueprint for a child is set in those first 3 years with expectations and who they'll become. And I want to know what kind of discipline style they have, what the expectations are. In addition to that, adversity. I always ask a question, you know, what is a moment, your most difficult moment in life, and how did you overcome it? And you get some superficial ones, and then you get some ones that are really heartfelt, you know, father passing away, and they got to take care of the whole family, and truly remarkable things, that those are things that you can build on. And I try to avoid the parents in which they enable behavior, negative behavior. I try to get away from those. So, very important. Open door policy, and I'm very thankful. You know, just briefly here, this is my 3rd year as head coach at the university. My 1st year as head coach is a part-time gig, which just, it is unbelievable. But I'm teaching full-time at Lincoln High, and then I would try to get over to the office by 4 or 5 o'clock and still have time with my family. It was a lot to juggle. And so here I'm trying to create this culture of baseball, and I'm never around. So the guys never really got to see me until I was actually on the field. And me on the field is different than me being in the office. So I'm very thankful for the university providing this opportunity for me to be full-time. And I'm telling you, within the first week of me being on campus and having an open door policy, it is crazy the things that come in through that door. But nonetheless, all of them are serious issues to these guys, and they appreciate the fact that I can be one to listen and possibly problem solve with them and get through it. Vulnerability. Coach is talking about being surrounded by a group of guys in which you can open yourselves up and share stories. And I feel like we've got a group of guys. I've always held on to this. I rarely have shared this story of my upbringing. I'm the first college graduate in my family. Came from severe poverty. Grew up on a farm, and you know, there's a lot of principles that I lived through on that farm that have guided me today. But I feel like I've got a group of guys that really can kind of surround themselves with that gritty attitude, and we can build a winner with it. And I'm very appreciative of my coaches that are going to be willing to open up, and you know, we were all there as college students, you know, and we get to share that with them and provide some guidance for them. And then lastly, lead by example. My coaching staff, we're total blue collar. I mean, we grit it out. Coach Z, you know, he was talking about his hours in the fall. You know, he's working full time for Cabela's. And then in the fall, he's putting in 20 to 25 hours per week for baseball. In the off season, he's putting some time in, but then we get into the season, and it's quite possible he's putting in 70 to 80 hours per week between Cabela's and baseball. Coach Soderberg, you know, this is a guy that's teaching, and he's trying to balance between being a full-time teacher and meeting those commitments in the classroom, but also, I mean, he's grinding it out, showing up, and being a part of these guys' lives. And then Coach Heidemann. Coach Heidemann working full-time, and then he's showing up to the ballpark, getting off of work, all dirty. But that's just who they are, who we are, and what we represent. And I want our guys to really follow through with that and follow that lead of just get it done, grind it out, and get it done. Okay? And ownership. This is the last piece. I think with us moving in the direction of gentlemen following us, I want to give back to them. Because I know when I was in the classroom and I gave students the opportunity to there would be some students that are artistic and they would put together a drawing for a final project, while others were really good at writing. They could put together a paper for me, but they gave the choice and they took ownership of it. I feel like Agile is the piece, the linchpin for us going into being successful. Is now we got guys that are bought into our vision, but now we're giving it back to them of what they see as struggles and what we really are good at and how we can move that forward for future success. Okay?
All right, now we're going to get into how we're actually using Agile practices and principles. So that first part was really the changing environment in college athletics is very similar to the changing environment in business. Okay, and then you're seeing some of the stuff that we have to do in college athletics in order to adapt and adhere and change the culture into being a winning team, similar to business. So, going to the first slide here. This is our practice for the fall. Practice 1, practice 2, practice 3, practice 4. Right here we have scrimmage number 1. I had a pitchers meeting on the 12th. Met with Coach B to get our practice plans going. 6, 7, 8. Scrimmage 2, pitchers meeting, practice plans. Practice 10, 11, 12. We finish every year with a black gold World Series where we split the teams up into 2. So we have our draft night, practice plans, we head through this, and then we have our black gold World Series. So I'm sitting there and I'm looking at our practice schedule one day, and I'm sitting there and I looked at all my practices right here lead into this scrimmage right here. And then all my practices right here lead into this scrimmage here. And all my practices here lead into the Black Gold World Series. Well, what does that sound like? Sprints, right? So if I go to the next slide, and I change from practice to sprint, and now I have a demo, which is my scrimmage. So here I am, I got my sprint 1, my sprint 2, my sprint 3, and then my demos. Now I sit here and I look, I have pitchers meetings. And what are my pitchers meetings? My pitchers meetings are an opportunity for me to teach my players what's going on, go through stuff that we need to improve on, we need to work on, we need to fix for the upcoming week. My meetings with Coach Ballinger are, what do we need to do? What do we need to implement to be successful this week? What did that sound like? And what does the pitchers meeting sound like? Could sound like a retro, right? So you go to the next slide. Now I have players retros, and we actually implemented a player retro. What worked well this week? What needs to be improved? What should we never do again? And I'll go into that on another slide, but I cannot tell you the success that we had from that. And we do it every single week, even in the off season. Feedback that would take us a year to get at the end of the season, we are now getting it every single week, and we have made adjustments with our practice plans. So now all of a sudden, I have 3 sprints in the fall for us to get things done. So I got a framework now for Agile methodologies. We go into the next one. Head coach. Okay, so a head coach, ultimately they get the win or the loss, right? That's on their record. We're a team, but they get a win or a loss. So you'd probably say that they're responsible for what is on the field, right? So what does that sound like? An assistant coach. I'm closest with the players. I work with the players in order to achieve the head coach's vision. What is that? The players. They're the ones that produce. They're the ones that are out there and make everything come to life. What is that? It's the team. All of a sudden, our positions on baseball that have been so defined are actually very agile. and how they're operating. Next slide. This was our first retro that we had, and it took about 5 minutes for us to get into it. I know you can't see it well, but this is what went well, what did not go well, and what needs to be improved. Look at that improved list, okay? Top down, what needs to be improved. Everything from more swings in practice. We want an all defensive day for practice. We want more video and film. Which shuttle could help? Baseball project, please. What didn't work well? Pitchers BP. So we wanted pitchers to throw BP. Our guys only got maybe 2 or 3 swings because our guys couldn't throw strikes in BP. I'm not sure if you've ever gone from throwing 85 miles an hour to going to 45 feet and trying to put it in there. It is not easy. That's why they leave it to the old guys to do. So pitchers BP, never should do that again. So we wiped that from the next week's practice. Stuff that went well, our fun run, pitchers backing up bases, our flat grounds. We had a practice where all we did is practice great plays. They loved it. So we have to make sure that we incorporate it in our next practice, or our next week's practice in order to do it. Next slide. This was our practice plan first week of this fall. This is our focus areas. Get prepared to complete. Understand routine, lower half, catching window, proper mechanics, improved footwork, better mechanics, PFPs. Then we have know your hitting groups, what you're supposed to be doing. What are we getting out of it? What are we accomplishing?
You're checking boxes on a plan.
It's checking boxes, right? We're running through. Nothing's organized. Nothing's leading into everything. Next one. Practice plan afterwards. Outside command, first pitch strikes. The entire week, that's all we worked on for our pitching staff. Defensive work, all we worked on, cuts and relays. Cage work, 440 prep. It's a drill that we do that allows you to spray the ball to the other side of the field. All we worked on the entire week was those areas. Now, when I got to my demo, how do you think my outside pitches were? Much improved, because a week before, I was sitting there, and on Monday, I'm having him work on inside fastballs. On Tuesday, I'm having him work on curveballs for a strike. On Wednesday, I'm having him work on a fastball outside. On Thursday, I'm having him work on something else. It's just a scatterbrain. We never mastered anything. We tailored it to outside command and first pitch strikes and the importance of it. We set up our practice plans. I used our knowledge, worked with the players, and developed stuff that would get us better at that. We went from our first pitch strikes of being 40% to our first pitch strikes being 60%. Was it where it needed to be? No. It wouldn't hit our definition of done. But that improvement is tremendous. And that was in a span of a week, and all it had to do was focusing our priorities. So I'm going to take you through our spring calendar. And this is really going to explain a lot, because there's probably some questions that are flowing right now. So our spring calendar, start up in February. We got a practice plan, we got our first week of practice. We come to the 12th, our pitchers are throwing live. We have a couple of the practices that we do. We got a team meeting, practice planning, another week of practice, pitchers throwing live again, team meeting, team planning, another week of practice, and we have a game versus Westminster. So let's go ahead and change this up. Next slide. If I'm running through that and I'm looking that my first game is against Westminster, for my team defense, I have to have bunt coverages, and there's 4 coverages in order to accomplish that. I have to have first and third defenses. There's 3 scenarios within first and third defenses. Pick plays, I have 5 pick plays. Pitchers covering first, there's 2 different scenarios for that. Rundowns, 4 scenarios. Cuts and relays, 5 types. What does that look like? Backlog. Okay, that's all the stuff that I need to accomplish, or we need to accomplish as a team. Right? Next slide. Do you really think that in 3 weeks I could get that all done?
So you have to prioritize for what you do for each game. So how do you break your backlog down?
Minimal viable product, right? So, my first game, our first game,
Team, right?
you corrected me about 7 times. I get very attached to things. Our first game.
Good ownership.
Yes.
Promise, coach.
Our first game is against Westminster College down in Missouri on February 25th. I need to have a minimal viable product in order to win a baseball game. In between that time, when do you think my next most important game is? The start of conference. Okay? The start of conference is March 24th at Coe College. At that point in time, that's when my full backlog needs to be complete. So as I go for release 1, release 2, release 3 is when we get to the playoffs. Now what's going to be in release 3? Release 3 is going to be those plays that you never see during the season. The pitcher goes around, fake throws it into center field, the center fielder dives around, and we hit the guy out. Works only once a season, will never work after that, but it could win you a conference championship, and we've seen it win a conference championship. So if you look at it from an Agile perspective, that's all your nuts and bolts and cool stuff that we add in our final release. Now who's prioritizing what needs to happen during this?
Product original.
He is. He's responsible for it. He has right now 5 backlogs that he has to manage. Team defense, pitching, hitting, fielding, base running. And with all of those, we have a backlog, and we have to prioritize that backlog. So here's our backlog. My bunk coverages, I need to have 3 of those for a minimal viable product. First and third, there's 3 scenarios. 2 of those are needed for an MVP. Okay, pitchers covering first, I need both of those by the time I get down. So here I am breaking down my backlog into what I actually need for my MVP for game 1. Now, I would like to have all this done by the time I get into conference, because it's going to be necessary, because we're going to see those scenarios. But everybody knows your non-conference games early in the season, unless you're going up against an Appalachian State or a Boise State, generally those are the games where you're not going to show the covers. Okay, you're going to show minimal plays, what you have to do that is your core to be successful. So what we do is we have to figure out what our core is to be successful. Definition of done, 90% proper execution. Location of players, proper throws, proper reads. Okay, you saw all the players running around in the Chicago Cubs video. That wasn't on accident. They know where they have to be, how they have to get there, the amount of time it takes to get there, and they have to execute that throw. Okay, you saw that throw past the first baseman scored a run. That's an error. When we run through, so we're going to run, one of our first weeks is bunk coverages, and we're going to identify the 3 bunk coverages that we run through in the first week. We'll have a few of these other ones, but that's going to be our #1 priority. And every single day we are going to run through and we are going to practice bunk coverages. We're going to practice it in individual defense, we're going to practice it in team defense, we're going to work with the team to develop what can we do to ensure that we are executing our bunk coverages the way they need to be. We get to Saturday. Saturday is now my demo day. I'm sorry, Sunday. Sunday's now my demo day. I get into Sunday, what our goal is out of 20 plays run, we want to be successful on 18 of them, and it's not just getting the out, it is the proper execution, throwing to the right bag, having the communication and the footwork, and all this stuff is taught during the team meetings, during our sprint planning. All that information is taught during those times. So our players need to execute 90%. Now if they don't, we need to look at doing it again for the following week. And that's where prioritizing the backlog. So if we get down here and we don't get down to cuts and relays, and this is not the prioritized backlog, by the way. We wouldn't give that away. cuts and relays, if we don't get to cuts and relays, you're jumping ahead. If we don't get to cuts and relays, product owner needs to be okay with the fact that we didn't get to cuts and relays because we did not hit the definition of done. So that's how important our practices are, and that's how we can streamline our practices. Now, just because I go and I hit my definition of done, do you really think that I'm going to stop doing bump coverages into our first game and just let them forget them for 2 weeks?
Nope.
Regression testing, folks. We get to the following Sunday, we need to hit our definition of done for bump coverages, just like the new stuff that's added to the backlog. It just means that we're not going to be working on them on a daily basis. Next slide. So here you go, here's my MVP. Sprint run with my demo, I have my retro, got my sprint planning, sprint 2 with my demo, my retro, sprint planning because we have a game this week. We run through our last sprint. On the 25th, I'm releasing my minimal viable product out to Westminster, and we're going to kick their ass. At least we better. Does that make sense?
Do you have a regression testing type of event, or is it just you bake it into the drills or not?
That's a good question. So what we actually do is we set up a full, if we're doing like bunk coverages, and we go to try to do bunk coverages, what we'll hit is whatever is prioritized in our backlog for that week, and then after that drill, we will go into our secondary drill, which if it's bunk coverages, we'll give out whatever sign we want to give out. It doesn't mean it's going to go in a certain cadence, certain order, anything like that, but it's a scripted play that we'll send out to them, and then we will go and execute, and they'll have to execute 18 out of 20.
Called the bun blitz. That bun blitz, just throw it at them and put pressure on them. Then the theory is when game time comes around, the game is slowed up for them to execute.
So all this information, like I said, made sense in my head. Being a Scrum Master, going through classes, made sense to me. Being in project management. He's not in the business world. So my perspective of this is different than his perspective, and this slide is for him to talk about how he thought I was absolutely crazy when I came to him with this and how it's evolved.
I wouldn't necessarily say crazy. I think it meshed with what I wanted to get accomplished. I mean, right here in front of me is essentially 2 decades of work. It's our baseball manual, and it's 45 pages worth of knowledge. Everything you want to know from offensive philosophy to defensive philosophy, pitching, base running, everything. And then you really break this down, and I think to myself, where do you start? I mean, that it is. Where do you start? How do you do it? And how do you implement it in such a way that others are going to take ownership of it? Because that's what it boils down to, is you want a group of young men that are going to take ownership with what we want to create. And I feel like Agile is essentially that model. It is giving their feedback. These guys get together and talk about what goes well, what do we get rid of, and guess what? None of those items on that list really shocked me. Those are things that I already was thinking about, but they get to share it, and that's our starting point. And at the end of it, I get to break it down of, if we're talking about hitting, they create that backlog, I'm going to prioritize and come up with the 3 that I feel is most viable to our success and trying to get to that final date. Okay? So, I think we're open up to questions. And
what did your team think about the retro the first time you brought that up to them? Were they on board? Excuse me, were they on board immediately, or are they like, this is crazy, what do you mean we're going to talk about this?
It took about 5 minutes for us to get in there. And it took me opening up and being vulnerable about what we did as a coaching staff that did not work for them to catch on to it. And then they realized our retros are a safe space. And I gave them an Agile one-on-one presentation and why we're doing what we're doing. And when they realized that it was a safe space, because he's not allowed in there, He's a product owner. He's not allowed in my retros. I'll take that information and I'll give it to him. Okay, but no players' names are shared. If he gets upset, there was one the other day that said, coaches' communication need to be improved on text messaging.
And I'm like, I'm immediately thinking, there's only about 3 to 4 of them. Those were young men that were pissing me off. They text me a half hour before a camp's supposed to start. Hey, coach, I'm not going to be there. Well, you dang right I'm not going to text you back because you don't want to hear my response. So the good thing is this works because Coach Z is able to play both sides. I mean, one is gather information, open, honest information, but bottom line, he's also wise enough to figure out if something needs to be challenged, he can do it. Because, you know, oftentimes there's things on there that are, they just need to be challenged.
So I do go through and challenge them, like one with the text message. I said, well, did any of you guys bring that up to Coach Ballinger? Well, no. Well, take the initiative and bring it up. So that went on. Our retro, more initiative out of our players to communicate with the coaches. So yes, the retro has been absolutely huge and helpful. It took about 5 minutes for us to get into it. We would have never seen that feedback until the end of the season. Never seen that feedback until the end of the season.
And the response from players pre-Agile or post-Agile, have they seen or noticed anything? Are they behaving different?
Oh, yes. That's a great question. So, like Coach said, they now have an influence on the practices. So we sit there and something that didn't work, so like the pitchers throwing BP, that is something that we would absolutely love to see because I think throwing BP really helps you spot up and there's certain reasons for it. It doesn't work. It didn't work. So we took their feedback and in the next week's practice they saw it immediately. It was immediate implementation. More swings. Okay, you guys feel like we need more swings at the field? Here's a couple options that you can do on your own. Oh, by the way, we're going to adjust our time frames to give you more swings at the field. So they saw immediately. And in our retros, we talk about the last week what we needed to improve on, and did we hit our mark to improve it. So the players have really taken that ownership, and I tell you beforehand, it was a command and control. And now, honestly, I feel much more linear. I'm much closer with the players, and I feel like we're going in a better direction because of it.
And I would say part of that was on purpose. I mean, this is our third year. Year one, you know, I was a part of the old staff, but the expectations around there were so low. I mean, essentially, their definition of fun was much different than what I've experienced. Their definition of fun was more about just hanging out with one another, camaraderie. It was a social, right? And I had to come in there and hit it hard. And so it wasn't a sense of where I'm really gathering any kind of feedback from anybody. I'm just going to come in with expectations. Here's where we're going to raise the level of baseball around here. And either you're on board or you can go somewhere else. Fast forward in time, you know, it feels good. When Coach is talking about having a roster, a group of young men that you feel are on board, we've got it. And now we want to give back to them where this is a family-like atmosphere and we can do this together.
So the way you built that though is before it was kind of waterfall-y where we're going to tell you what you're going to do, and now you're instituting their feedback, so they own what happens on the field because it's them who's suggesting that you do it. That's how you've changed the whole culture of your baseball team, really.
And what we've done is, I take a lot of the things that I've learned at Cabela's, everything from individual development plans to goal planning and all that stuff, and we use our meetings to actually teach them because we're not just preparing these guys for a season, we're preparing them for life after college. And that's really what our job is. So the other day we went through goal planning, and I brought my two leaders or captains up in our meeting to go through goal planning, and it absolutely tanked. I mean, it was horrible. And I was sitting down, and these guys are sitting there like this. So what do you guys think? So I took a picture, They didn't know it. I didn't ridicule them in front of it or anything like that. After the meeting, I had them stay, and I took out that picture. I said, would you guys follow these guys? And they're like, oh, no. So I gave them a little coaching on what expectations are for goals. And they came back a week later, and they had 19 well thought out, team bought in goals that was something we've never seen since being here. And of those 19 goals, honestly, we could probably tailor it down. It's not how I would go about goal planning, but it's their goals. It is not my goals. It is their goals. And we're going to stand with it and make sure we do what we can so that they can achieve their goals. Did you have a question?
Well, you kind of hit on it. You're talking about goals. I was going to ask how you get the team involved. As the product owner, as the head coach, you cast a vision for the team. How do you involve the team in that process of the vision so they've got ownership in it? It sounds like you're doing it through goals, but vision being a higher thing. Then how do you keep that visible to your team throughout the year so that they're always looking at that one thing and focused on that vision?
We do individual meetings, so most recent meeting, we had kind of reflection time. So they came in, I gave them a depth chart, essentially where they're at, and suggestions for improvement, and suggestions for, you know, what they're really good at. In addition to that, they're doing goal setting there. One is big picture. What do we want their legacy, or what do they want their legacy to be by the time they leave Nebraska Wesleyan? And it's fascinating to me that these young people come in, and it'll be oftentimes freshmen. They really don't have that vision of, oh, I just want to be known as a hard worker. Well, no, that's the everyday grind, right? We're talking big picture here. You know, want to be that person that's got the traction for us to win conference titles. So those individual meetings, and periodically they'll come in and we'll revisit them to make sure that we're all on board. But it is fun. And one thing at the end is I'm always about barriers. You know, everybody's got the common goal of winning a conference title. That sounds great, but what are the barriers to us attaining that? And overwhelmingly, the majority of guys are coming up with team camaraderie. Guys getting together, and I think about, you know, like my playing days, played up at Wayne State, and we, you know, my glory days, we beat Creighton. I mean, that's a pretty big deal. But, you know, I really don't remember the ins and outs of that game, but I remember hanging out with the guys and that brotherhood that we had and those friendships that we have stuck with over these last couple decades. I want these guys to get that.
So we put things in place so that they support it. So since they identified, we actually put down, let them put together, we had them jot down teams that they feel are successful, that have been successful, championship style teams, and what made them successful. And there was 8 attributes, and I had them rank those 8 attributes, and the number 1 was team chemistry. So with that, one of the things that we look at, and you'll see it on their goal sheets, one of their 19 goals, is to get together every week or every other week. I think is the verbiage is every other week. So now we hold them accountable to it. They're required to have a team event. Whatever it is, if you're sitting there watching the Super Bowl, that's fine. If you go out bowling, that's fine. But they're required to adhere to their goals. And it's our job to make sure that they adhere to their goals.
And per D3 rules, they're voluntarily doing these.
Well, we're usually not there.
Well, we're not, so
They-
that's what I'm just putting a disclaimer out there.
Do you have any feedback from any other athletic departments? You shared what you're doing with, you know, like the football team or, you know, track or anything?
I
Or
stay
any other
pretty
coaches?
humble. I mean, that's just who I am. Like, you know, I have a vision, and I know I've got a coaching staff that meets that vision, but until we do it and win it, then I think it's an opportunity for us to share with others. But, you know, until that time, I just quietly do my job and quietly, you know, rally these guys to what we want to get accomplished.
I think there's a lot of opportunities if you look at it from a football standpoint. If you look at a spring practice or a spring practice how you could run and accomplish what you need to accomplish, or you break down your release planning for your non-conference games, and then once you get to conference, you start opening up, and then usually there's that team right in the middle of your schedule that you have to open everything else up for. So, think of like the Nebraska schedule, you probably would have wanted to open that up against Ohio State. Didn't necessarily maybe mark that as a release game, but those are your opportunities within, such as football. You can do it pretty much with any sport. Really, you can map it out very similar to how we've done with baseball. So I think, like Coach said, once we show that it can work, that it is working for us, we're more than happy to show it.
As you prioritize like your MVP for that first game, how are you setting the priorities as you look through your backlog of items? How are you making those decisions as to what's the priority for that first game?
Well, it's starting with fundamentals. I mean, we're talking about, in the fall, the backlog was created of simply handling the baseball, because we can't do anything more sophisticated than that. And once we have proper footwork and we're handling that baseball and it looks efficient, great, we can move on and do some bigger things. And the other piece that, on the backlogs, with communication, I think there's two things here. One is Agile allows, we live in a world where everybody's isolated, and I don't think everyone has interpersonal communication. I mean, it's all too easy to just isolate the phone, and you get amongst people, and people don't know how to solve conflicts. And so that provides that opportunity. In addition to that, though, the game of baseball, the successful teams that I was part of, those were constant communication, just constant chatter amongst the guys, especially between the pitcher and the catcher. Constant. And so that's where we had prioritized our work, and there was definite improvement in it, and it allowed us to move on to this more sophisticated work.
So a lot of the prioritization that you're going to see is the likelihood of us seeing it in a game. So bump coverages first weekend, we're going to see bumps. Now, are we going to see somebody try to do a wheel play against us? No, that's not going to happen first weekend. So we don't need to prioritize that to be ready for first weekend. So that's kind of where we prioritize, is how likely are we going to see this scenario in this situation. And like Coach said, for us, the backlog started at handling baseball. And then from there, progressively got bigger and bigger and bigger.
I know folks have to get back to work. Are there any other questions, or one more question for the coaches? Thank you, gentlemen. We appreciate your time.